Hello, Greg Brooks here, and welcome to episode number 6 of GB Life TV. And today's episode is all about sugar. Now, sugar, we all love sugar, don't we? And a lot of us really crave sugar. But the biggest problem with sugar is ultimately it's not very good for us. And when we evolved, going back thousands of years, there wasn't actually much sugar, carbohydrates around. So we're actually eating foods now that we're basically not designed to eat. Anyway, over the last 50 years, sugar has seriously been on the increase, on the rise, and the amount of saturated fats that we eat has been on the decline. And it's interesting to note that in the last 50 years, whilst sugar has been going up, obesity has been going up tremendously, and whilst saturated fats has been on the decrease, obesity has been going up. So I think it's fair to say, or at least a lot of people, a lot of the latest research is now saying that sugar is the biggest problem with fat, obesity, diabetes, as we all know, and so on, and not saturated fats. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about sugar. So the sugar you're probably all very well aware of is just regular granulated sugar, or sucrose sugar. That's that one there. And we've also got what's become very, very popular now is high fructose corn syrup, which is a very cheap syrup to produce. And in the USA it's absolutely huge. In the UK it's not so common, but I've got a good thought that in the future I think that it's going to be on the rise too. I would imagine so anyway. And if you take something like HP sauce here, basically fructose syrup is in there along with glucose, molasses as well, which is a sugar. We've got dates, which is as well a very high producing sugar. You've got to be so careful when you buy foods now, because the market is getting very, very savvy to the fact that we're trying to avoid sugar, so they're disguising sugars. But basically anything that ends in OSE, O's, like maltose, sucrose, fructose, all of those are sugar. Most of your syrups are sugar, so look out for your corn syrups and so on. And of course your high fructose syrup. Now, so we've got those basic sugars there. Next we've got naturally occurring sugars. So you've got things like your maple syrup, you've got things like honey, and you've also got things like fruit. Now all of these produce sugars as well. And although we think that because they're natural they're good for us, actually they cause similar problems than artificial sugars do. So it's just an extra sugar on top of artificial sugars. And then finally, if this isn't bad enough, we've then got starches, which is the other part of the carbohydrate family. And we've got things like rice. So a lot of people buy rice cakes because they believe it's healthy for them. But again, it's a starch. We've got things like flours from grains. We've got things like potatoes, pasta, bread. All these things are carbohydrates. And in the body, they turn to sugar exactly the same as these other things. The liver just turns them to sugar, just like everything else. So it doesn't matter which one of these you're eating, ultimately they end up as sugar in your body. So imagine all these things put together. Basically, we're having huge problems with sugar now in our diets, and this is what is causing the obesity and diabetes and so on that's happening today. Now, what happens when we eat some sugar or even drink sugar? Bear in mind that a lot of drinks have got sugar in as well. Your Coca-Colas, lemonades, all these have got sugar in too. When we eat or drink any sugar, we basically stimulate the fat storage hormone, which is called insulin. I'm sure you've heard of insulin. It's obviously related to diabetes. Now what the hormone insulin does is it basically stores the excess sugar in your bloodstream. And it does this in one of three ways. It either stores it in your liver, it either stores it in your muscle tissue, or it turns it into fat and stores it in your adipose tissue or fat cells. So it stores it in 3 different places. Now, obviously we don't want to store too much fat, and the body desperately tries to keep blood sugar down to a minimum, because ultimately a teaspoon really, but it needs to keep blood sugar levels down to a minimum because sugar, or glucose, which is in the body, is very, very destructive. Not only has it been linked to things like cancer, but also there's growing levels of candida, which is a yeast overgrowth. Obviously bacteria like sugar, it feeds bacteria, sugar does, and that happens in your GI tract, your gastrointestinal tract. That causes all kinds of problems, from skin problems to headaches to depression, weakness, bloating, gas, all these sorts of things. So that's on the rise as well due to excess sugar. It also causes a thing called glycation. And what glycation is a reaction with glucose with fats and proteins in the body. And that is very destructive as well, particularly to the cells and the arterial walls of the body. So not good either. And finally, excess glucose in the body also is damaging to the cells which make us age a lot quicker. And unfortunately this is accumulative. So the more glucose we have in our body over the years, the quicker we're going to age. And the bad news and the sad news is it's very, very difficult to reverse this process. So think of it this way: the more sugar you're eating, the quicker you are aging. So that's sugar there. We know the body's obsessed with maintaining a minimum amount of sugar, basically a teaspoon. Now you think, if the body wants to maintain only a teaspoon of blood sugar in its system, we drink something like a can of Coca-Cola, which has got something like, I think the last time I heard, 13 teaspoonfuls of sugar. Just think how hard your body has to work to store and get rid of all that sugar. I mean, it's a ridiculously destructive thing to put in the body. And as I've just said, insulin is one thing that helps to store this. And as we stress at the hormone insulin constantly, this is what causes insulin resistance, which is ultimately the start of diabetes. So I think I've gone through most of the sugar, the effects it has on the body. The only other thing I'd like to say is the more carbs that we eat, the more we crave carbs as well. And this is a big problem with people like alcoholics, because alcoholics basically crave carbs. So often when they give up booze, because alcohol is ultimately a carbohydrate, when they give up booze, they still haven't got rid of their carbohydrate addiction. So they end up then having to turn to other sugars, and you'll find often recovering alcoholics will tend to lean towards lots of sugary foods. And in fact, in the olden days, they used to give recovering alcoholics, spoonfuls of honey to try and help them sort of sort out their cravings for sugar. So what is the answer? I've gone through all the problems with sugar, the reaction it has on the body, how it stimulates insulin, and how that drives the sugar into storage, and it stores the body. I would say that it's fascinating to know that we've got several hormones in the body that will rise our glucose levels, increase our blood sugar levels, but we've only got one hormone, and that is insulin, that reduces our blood sugar levels. And the reason for this is, back in thousands and thousands of years ago, as we were evolving, there was a real shortage of carbohydrates. There wasn't many carbohydrates at all. And so if we needed, well, basically there was no carbohydrate. I'm losing my track of thought here. Come on, Greg, concentrate. There wasn't many carbohydrates back then, so we didn't really need the hormones to reduce our blood sugar levels, whereas we needed plenty of hormones to increase our blood sugar levels in order to give us quick energy so we could escape from lions, saber-toothed tigers, and hold on to things, and all kinds of crazy survival mechanisms that we used to have back then. So the answer is basically cut down on as much sugar and carbohydrate as you can. Carbohydrate has been linked to all these diseases. It's the biggest problem. It also causes huge cravings in our body. And what you want to do is try and encourage your body to use ketones. That's ketones. Now what ketones are, they are the energy providing source of fat within our body. So in our body we want to try and create energy from fat, which are the ketones, rather than creating the energy from sugars, which is what ultimately is happening. We don't want to be a carb craving monster. We want to try and get our sugars, so we want to get our energy from the ketones or from the fat. One good way to look at this and to think about this is if we have a fire, if we're eating lots of carbohydrates, we're basically just throwing pieces of paper, twigs and so on that fire, and it's burning through them very, very quickly. That's why we crave more carbohydrates, because we ultimately want that lift again to increase our energy levels. So rather than having to feed ourselves every couple of hours, which is very, very tiring, it's exhausting on the body, let alone on the hormonal system and so on, what we want to do is we want to be trying to eat more good saturated fat. And that is the biggest problem nowadays. People have reduced their fat intake and increased their sugar intake. So, takeaway from this is eat less carbohydrates, eat less sugar, eat more good fats to try and encourage your body to get its energy from fat, and then you'll stay fuller for much, much longer. Think of fat as like putting a big log on the fire rather than throwing bits of paper on there. It's going to last much, much longer. There you go. That's all I've got to say. I hope I made that clear to you and I didn't ramble on too much. Sugar is basically, it's not good. A little bit now and again as a treat is fine, but ultimately try and stick to your vegetables and try and stick to your fats and your proteins. That's all for now, and I shall catch you soon.